The sun was setting over the horizon of Gliese, 581G, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. In the distance, the crumbling remains of an old Earth outpost stood defiantly against the harsh alien environment. Inside, Mark Taylor, a retired super soldier, was busy repairing a communications device. Mark had come to this forgotten planet for solitude, far from the wars and conflicts of the galaxy. His only companion was his loyal dog, Rex, a German shepherd with a glossy black and tan coat, who had been with him through countless battles back on Earth. Here, on Gliese 581G, they had found peace, or so they thought. As Mark tinkered with the device, Rex lay quietly by the doorway, ears twitching at every unusual sound. Suddenly, Rex stood, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Mark noticed the change in Rex's demeanor and paused, soldering iron in hand. "What is it, boy?" Mark whispered, glancing towards the open door. The answer came not in words, but in a sudden blinding light that enveloped the house. Mark dropped to the ground, covering his head as the walls shook. He heard Rex bark furiously, followed by a high-pitched whine that tore through Mark's heart. When he finally dared to look up, Rex was gone, and the doorway was filled with the silhouettes of 3 tall, thin figures. The aliens moved with eerie precision, their skin shimmering with a metallic sheen under the light of their spacecraft. They communicated in sharp, clipped tones, a language unfamiliar yet filled with intent. Mark, heart-pounding, reached for the pistol he'd kept from his soldiering days. A relic, but deadly. He took aim as the figures approached, the leader holding something that emitted a pulsating blue light. Mark's finger tightened on the trigger, but he hesitated. They hadn't seen him yet, hidden behind the debris. As the aliens inspected the room, their gaze lingered on pictures of Mark with Rex, images from better days on distant worlds. Their conversation intensified, and Mark strained to understand. Were they looking for him? Did they know who he was, or was Rex their target all along? His thoughts were interrupted by a faint, painful yelp from outside. Without thinking, Mark sprang to action, firing his weapon. The shot echoed loudly. The aliens scrambled for cover, but not before Mark was on them. His training kicked in, every move was precise, every strike lethal. In the chaos, Mark rushed outside, calling for Rex. He found him a few meters from the house, lying motionless on the ground. Mark's heart sank as he approached, his vision blurred by tears. He fell to his knees beside Rex, gently lifting his head. "I'm here, buddy," Mark whispered, stroking Rex's fur. The dog's eyes flickered open, meeting Mark's in a silent goodbye before closing forever. The grief was overwhelming, a burning rage filling Mark's chest. He looked up at the stars, the universe seemingly indifferent to his loss. But he wasn't. They had taken his peace, his friend. They didn't know who he was, or perhaps they did, and they had made the gravest mistake. Mark buried Rex under his favorite tree the next morning, the quiet broken only by the distant hum of alien ships. As he set the last stone in place, he made a vow. He would make them pay. Every last one of them. The dawn on Gliese 581G was a spectacle of crimson and gold, painting the rocky terrain in fiery hues. Mark stood over Rex's grave, his eyes hard and unyielding. The night had brought him no comfort, only a sharpening of his resolve. His time as a peacemaker was over. Now he would return to what he knew best: war. Mark headed back inside the outpost, his steps purposeful. He pulled down a sealed crate from the top shelf of a storage closet. Dust fell in clouds as he dragged it to the center of the room. With a deep breath, he opened it, revealing an array of military gear and several high-powered weapons, remnants of his past life as a super soldier. He dressed quickly, strapping on his combat gear, feeling the familiar weight of the armor settling on his shoulders. Each piece was a reminder of battles fought and won. But this time, he wasn't just fighting for survival or duty. He was driven by vengeance. Before leaving, Mark powered up the communications device he had been repairing. He sent out a signal, an encrypted message to old contacts from his military days. If he was going to war, he would need allies. The message was brief. "Need immediate assistance, coordinates follow, situation critical." With the message sent, Mark turned to the arsenal laid out before him. He selected a few key weapons: a plasma rifle, known for its devastating power, a pair of energy pistols, and several grenades. He packed them along with ample ammunition, preparing for any situation. As he equipped himself, his communicator beeped. A quick, sharp sound indicating an incoming message. He paused, checking the device. It was a response from Commander Sarah Knox, an old friend and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. "Received your signal. Gathering a team. Hold position. Knox out." The confirmation brought a grim smile to Mark's face. Sarah was reliable, a seasoned warrior who had stood by him in many firefights. Help was coming, but he knew he couldn't just wait. He needed to start gathering intelligence, understanding who these aliens were and why they had come. Leaving the outpost, Mark made his way to the nearest alien structure he had observed from afar days before. It was a risk, moving out in the open, but necessary. As he approached, he used his military training to stay out of sight, moving from cover to cover. The structure was unlike anything human architects had built. It was smooth with an almost organic look to it, its walls shimmering with a translucent quality. Mark watched, noting the comings and goings of alien figures. They were clearly soldiers, perhaps a scouting party. He recorded their patterns, planning his next moves. That evening, as Mark observed the alien base, another message came through his communicator. "Team en route, ETA 24 hours. Be ready. Knox." Mark nodded to himself, feeling the stirrings of a plan forming. He would strike, but not alone. With Sarah and her team, they would hit the aliens hard, exploiting the intelligence he gathered. Tonight, he would watch and wait, but tomorrow the aliens would feel his wrath. As the sun set, casting long shadows once again across the alien world, Mark felt a cold determination settle in his bones. They had taken Rex, his only family left, and for that they would pay dearly. As the twin moons of Gliese 581G rose, their pale light cast ghostly shadows over the landscape. Mark sat perched on a high ridge overlooking the alien structure, his eyes never wavering from his target. The night was quiet, too quiet, and he knew that the stillness was just the calm before the storm. Below him, the alien base buzzed with activity. Lights flickered as patrols of soldiers moved in synchronized patterns. Mark noted every detail, every shift change, planning his assault with meticulous care. He wasn't just fighting for revenge, he was fighting for Rex, and the pain of his loss fueled his resolve. As dawn approached, a faint hum broke the silence. Mark looked up, his eyes scanning the horizon. A small stealth craft was descending, barely audible against the gentle moan of the wind. It was Sarah and her team. The craft landed softly a few meters from Mark. The hatch opened, and out stepped Commander Sarah Knox, her presence commanding as ever. She was followed by a team of 3 other soldiers, each carrying a range of weapons and gear. "Mark," Sarah greeted, her voice firm yet filled with concern. "It's been too long." "Too long indeed," Mark replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thanks for coming." Sarah nodded, her eyes taking in his battle-worn appearance in the grave nearby. "I heard about Rex. I'm sorry. We're here now, ready to help you end this." Mark led them to his vantage point, where he had set up a small camp. Maps and digital screens were scattered around, showing drone footage and tactical data. He quickly briefed the team on his observations and the layout of the alien base. "Their defenses are strong but predictable," Mark explained. "We have a 2-hour window during their power cycle to hit them hard and fast. We need to strike at their command center, create chaos, and gather any intel we can." Sarah listened intently, her mind already running through scenarios. "We'll split into 2 teams," she decided. "I'll take Jensen and Cole to the north side to disable their communications array. Mark, you and Torres hit the main gate. Once inside, it's a straight shot to their command center." The team nodded, each member reviewing their part in the plan. They spent the next few hours preparing, checking every weapon and piece of equipment. As the time neared, tension mounted, but so did their determination. With a final check of their gear, the team moved out. Mark led the way, his path illuminated by the dim light of the moons. The terrain was rough, and every step had to be measured and careful to avoid detection. As they approached the alien base, The silence was shattered by the sudden roar of an alarm. Mark's heart raced. Something had gone wrong. "They know we're here," Torres whispered, his hand on his weapon. "No turning back now," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Stick to the plan. Move!" Gunfire erupted as they breached the perimeter. The aliens, though surprised, were quick to respond. Energy beams crisscrossed the night as Mark and his team pushed forward. Inside the base, chaos reigned. Alarms blared and lights strobed as Mark and Torres fought their way through corridors filled with alien soldiers. Meanwhile, Sarah's team successfully disabled the communications array, cutting off the base from any external support. Mark and Torres reached the command center, bursting through the door with their weapons raised. Inside, they found a trove of databanks and control panels, alien technology humming with activity. Torres set charges while Mark downloaded as much data as he could onto a portable drive. "This might tell us why they're here, and how many more are out there," Mark said, his voice tense as he worked. Just then, the door to the command center slammed open. An alien, larger and more decorated than the others, stood imposingly in the frame. It barked orders in its harsh, clicking language, pointing a sophisticated weapon at Mark and Torres. Mark reacted instinctively, diving to the side as a beam of energy sliced through the air where he had just been standing. Torres returned fire, providing cover as Mark rolled behind a control panel. "Cover me!" Mark shouted, continuing to transfer data. The progress bar on the screen slowly filled, each second stretching infinitely as energy blasts whizzed past. Torres nodded, sweat beading on his forehead as he exchanged fire with the alien commander. The alien was relentless, its movements calculated and precise, pushing them back with advanced tactics. Meanwhile, Sarah's voice crackled over the communicator. "Mark, we're clear on our side, but we can't hold for long. You need to wrap it up." "Almost there," Mark replied, the download finally completing. He yanked the drive free and nodded to Torres. "Let's blow this place and get out." Torres triggered the explosives, and the command center erupted in flames and debris. The shockwave knocked them off their feet, but they managed to scramble out of the room just in time. Reunited with Sarah and her team outside, they made a hasty retreat under the cover of smoke and confusion. The alien base was a labyrinth of chaos, making their escape less contested as the enemy dealt with the internal damage. Once safely away from the base, the team paused to catch their breath under the protective shadow of a large rock formation. "Did we get anything useful?" Sarah asked, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. Mark held up the drive. "Everything they have on this planet and potentially others. It's going to take time to decrypt, but we have what we came for." The team looked around at the burning base in the distance, its fires lighting up the night sky. They had struck a significant blow, but the cost of the conflict was heavy, and the road ahead was uncertain. "We need to get this data back to the Coalition," Sarah stated. "It could be key to preventing further attacks on human settlements." Mark nodded, his thoughts with Rex. "Let's get off this planet. We've done what we needed to do here." As they boarded the craft and set course for the nearest friendly base, Mark looked back at Gliese 581G, its surface scarred by battle. He knew this was just the beginning. The data on the drive could change the course of the war, but more importantly, he had honored Rex's memory. The craft descended, leaving the alien planet behind as stars filled the sky, each one a distant, watchful eye in the vastness of space. As the stealth craft cut through the cosmos, the small team aboard was silent, each member lost in their own thoughts. Mark sat with the encrypted drive connected to his portable terminal, his fingers flying over the keys as he worked to break through the alien security protocols. The data contained within could reveal not just the reasons behind the unprovoked attack on his peaceful refuge, but also critical information about the enemy's strengths and intentions. Commander Sarah Knox watched Mark work, her expression a mix of concern and determination. She knew the toll this mission had taken on him, not just physically, but emotionally. Losing Rex had reignited a fire in Mark that she hadn't seen since the war days. It was a dangerous and potent fury, one that could either forge him into a formidable weapon or shatter him completely. "Any luck?" Sarah finally asked, breaking the silence. Mark didn't look up from his screen. Their encryption is complex, but I'm making progress. I should have something soon. As the hours passed, the craft neared a secure coalition base located on a moon orbiting a gas giant in a neighboring system. The base was a hub for military operations, and they would be able to further analyze the data with more sophisticated equipment. Upon landing, the team was met by General Abrams, an old ally of Mark and Sarah. The general was a burly man with a grizzled beard and eyes that seemed to pierce through to one's very soul. "Mark, Sarah, good to see you both in one piece." Abrams greeted them gruffly. "I hear you've brought us something that could turn the tide." "We hope so, General," Sarah replied as they followed him to the command center. "It's all here," she said, handing over the drive. In the command center, tech specialists immediately set to work on the alien drive under Mark's supervision. Screens flickered to life, displaying streams of data as the decryption process intensified. Meanwhile, Mark, Sarah, and General Abrams discussed their findings from the raid. Mark detailed the alien tactics and defenses, which were unlike any they had encountered before. Sarah added her observations on the aliens' communication disruptions, suggesting they had advanced jamming technologies. As they strategized, a technician called out, "General, we've cracked part of the encryption. You're going to want to see this." Everyone gathered around the main screen. The decrypted data revealed detailed maps of alien territories, including several unknown planets that were heavily fortified. More disturbingly, it included reconnaissance photos of other human colonies, suggesting that what happened on Gliese 581G was not an isolated incident but part of a larger plan. "This changes everything," General Abrams muttered, staring at the screen. "They're planning a full-scale invasion." Mark's jaw tightened. "Then we stop them. We use this intel to prepare our defenses and go on the offensive." General Abrams nodded. "Agreed. We'll need to coordinate with the entire coalition. Prepare for a briefing with the top brass, Sarah." As preparations for the briefing went underway, Mark returned to his work, diving deeper into the data. Hidden in the complex web of information, he discovered communications that hinted at a vulnerability in the aliens' supply lines. This could be the key to crippling their advance. Hours later, in a high-security briefing room, Mark presented his findings to the assembled military leaders. His report outlined a plan of attack that targeted these weaknesses. The room was filled with tense energy as strategies were debated and plans drawn. As the meeting concluded, Mark felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sarah, giving him a reassuring squeeze. "Rex would be proud," she whispered. Mark nodded, allowing himself a moment to feel the weight of her words. Rex's memory had driven him here, but now he was fighting for much more. This was about protecting humanity, about standing up against a threat that sought to overwhelm them. He looked around at the determined faces of the coalition's finest. They were ready for war, armed with crucial information that he had helped uncover. As they dispersed to make preparations, Mark felt a surge of resolve. The battle ahead would be daunting, but they were no longer in the dark. They were ready to fight back. With the decrypted data in hand, the coalition's response was swift and decisive. Bases across human-occupied space buzzed with activity, as ships were armed and troops mobilized for what was to be a preemptive strike against the alien aggressors. Mark was at the center of the preparations, his expertise and first-hand knowledge of the enemy proving invaluable. At the coalition's primary war room, a massive holographic display illuminated the faces of generals and strategists, each one poring over the intricate details of the upcoming operation. Mark stood by General Abrams, pointing out potential weaknesses in the alien defenses that the decrypted data had revealed. "We have a narrow window to strike," Mark explained, his finger tracing the route of their intended attack on the hologram. "Their supply lines here and here are thinly guarded. Likely they never expected us to hit them there." General Abrams nodded, his eyes scanning the projections. "Good work, Mark. We'll send 2 battle groups to these points. If we sever their supply routes, we can cripple their ability to sustain a prolonged conflict." Meanwhile, Sarah was coordinating with the naval fleets, ensuring that each ship was equipped with the latest countermeasures against the alien technology they had encountered. The mood among the crew was tense but determined. They knew the stakes were high, and the element of surprise was crucial to their success. As the preparations continued, Mark took a moment to step away from the bustling war room. He walked out onto the observation deck, where the cold, starlit expanse of space stretched out before him. It was a sobering reminder of the vastness of the conflict they were about to engage in. The silence was broken by Sarah joining him at his side. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "Just thinking about everything that's led to this," Mark replied, his gaze fixed on the stars. "It's hard to believe that it all started because they killed Rex." Sarah placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Rex was the catalyst, but you know this is bigger than him now. We're fighting to protect our homes, our families. Rex gave us the push we needed to see the threat clearly." Mark nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I'm ready for this." Back in the war room, the final plans were being laid out. The Coalition had decided on a two-pronged assault. The first wave would strike the alien outposts on the outer colonies, aiming to draw their forces out. The second wave, which included Mark and Sarah, would then penetrate deeper into enemy territory, targeting the supply hubs that had been identified from the decrypted data. As the fleet prepared to move out, Mark checked his equipment one last time. His combat suit was reinforced with the latest armor technology, and he carried a newly developed plasma rifle designed to penetrate the aliens' shields. The crews said their goodbyes, not knowing what the future held. Mark saw young soldiers, their faces set with resolve but underlying fear. He remembered his own first battle, the adrenaline and terror mixed with a fierce desire to stand strong. "You all know what to do," General Abrams addressed the gathered troops and crew. "We have the advantage of knowledge thanks to Commander Taylor and his team. Let's use it to end this threat once and for all." The fleet's engines roared to life, a thunderous sound that filled the hangar. Ships lifted off, forming formations in the cold void of space, ready to jump to hyperspace towards their designated targets. Mark and Sarah boarded their command ship, the resolve in their hearts matching the steely exterior of the vessel that carried them forward. As the ship made its jump to hyperspace, Mark looked back one last time at the receding base, his thoughts with Rex, his fallen friend who had set him on this path. The war was here, and he was ready to fight, to win. As the fleet sped through hyperspace, the atmosphere among the crew shifted from apprehensive to resolute. Aboard the flagship, Mark Taylor stood before a group of elite soldiers, his eyes sweeping over their determined faces. They were the best of the Coalition, hand-picked for the mission that would initiate the first wave of their counteroffensive. "Listen up," Mark began, his voice carrying clearly over the hum of the ship's engines. "The intel we've gathered has given us a clear advantage, but this won't be easy. We hit them hard and fast, targeting their main supply depot on Krythor 3. Without it, their operations in this sector will crumble." The soldiers nodded, their expressions set in grim determination. Mark continued, detailing the plan. "We'll be dropping in hot, right at the edge of their no-fly zone. Stealth is key until we hit the ground. Once we're in, it's a straight fight to the depot. Expect heavy resistance." Sarah Knox, overseeing the ship's navigation, gave Mark a nod, signaling that they were nearing their destination. "We're coming out of hyperspace in 3 minutes," she announced to the crew. "All hands, prepare for combat drop." The soldiers checked their weapons and equipment, making final adjustments. Mark pulled on his helmet, the visor snapping into place with a hiss. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the soldier within awakening fully to the challenge ahead. As the ship exited hyperspace, the dark expanse of space was suddenly alight with the energy signatures of defensive platforms orbiting Krythor 3. "Pilots, evasive maneuvers," Sarah ordered, as the ship jolted under the strain of sudden sharp movements. The dropships were quickly deployed, each one darting towards the planet's surface like steel rain. Mark's dropship shuddered as it descended through the atmosphere, anti-aircraft fire lighting up the sky around them. "Brace for impact!" the pilot shouted, just as the dropship hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud. The soldiers were up in seconds, pouring out of the dropship with Mark at the lead. They were met with a barrage of fire from alien defenders. Mark raised his rifle, sighting an enemy combatant. The plasma bolt flew true, hitting the alien and dropping it instantly. "Move! Move!" he yelled, pushing forward towards the depot. The fight was chaotic, the air filled with the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and alien war cries. Mark and his team pushed through, using the rough, rocky terrain for cover as they advanced. They reached the depot within an hour, a sprawling complex guarded by thick walls and heavy turrets. Mark called in their coordinates, and moments later the sky lit up as orbital strikes rained down, breaching the walls in a storm of fire and debris. The team breached the perimeter, fighting their way through the smoldering ruins. They planted explosives on key structures, ensuring the depot would not be operational again. With the mission accomplished, Mark signaled the retreat. "All units, fall back to extraction point Echo." As they fought their way back to the extraction point, Mark felt a grim satisfaction. They had struck a significant blow, but this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more bloodshed. They reached the extraction point just as their dropships landed. The soldiers quickly boarded, and the ships lifted off, leaving the burning depot behind. Back aboard the flagship, Mark watched Krythor III recede into the distance. The first strike was successful, but the war was far from over. He knew the enemy would retaliate, and they needed to be ready. "We've done well today," Sarah said, joining him at the viewport. "But this is just the start." Mark nodded. "Let them come. We'll be ready." As the fleet regrouped and set course for their next target, Mark's thoughts briefly returned to Rex, the friend he had lost. This victory was for him, for all they had suffered at the hands of the enemy. The war for their survival had truly begun. Hours later, as the fleet approached Varnus IV, the tension was palpable. The planet loomed large, its surface dotted with the lights of extensive military installations. Mark, leading the assault team, felt the familiar knot of apprehension and adrenaline as the dropship descended through the planet's atmosphere. The enemy was indeed prepared. Anti-air fire erupted around them, bright against the night sky. The dropship rocked violently, forcing the pilot to take evasive actions. "Hold tight!" the pilot yelled over the din. Mark braced himself against the bulkhead, reviewing the mission details in his mind. They needed to breach the command center and disrupt the leadership, ideally capturing high-value targets for interrogation. The dropship managed to land despite the heavy fire, and Mark's team spilled out into the chaos. They were immediately met with resistance. Energy bolts flew past, and explosions rocked the ground. "Move to cover!" Mark ordered, leading his team forward. They used the uneven terrain to their advantage, moving from one cover to the next, gradually closing in on the main command complex. Inside the complex, the battle intensified. The corridors echoed with the sounds of gunfire and alien shouts. Mark and his team pushed forward, using flashbangs to disorient the defenders as they breached door after door. Finally, they reached the central command room. Bursting in, they found several alien officers, caught off guard but quickly recovering to mount a defense. A fierce firefight ensued, but Mark's team was better prepared and overwhelmed the enemy. With the command center secured, Mark contacted the fleet. "Command hub is under control. Begin the next phase." As coalition forces started their operations outside, securing the remaining sectors of the base, Mark looked around at his team, their faces smeared with sweat and soot. They had accomplished their mission, but the cost was always high. Each victory brought relief mixed with sorrow for the fallen. As the battle for Varnus IV continued outside, Mark knew that each step brought them closer to ending the conflict. But the echo of every gunshot reminded him that peace was still a distant hope. After securing the regional command hub on Varnus IV, the coalition forces faced relentless counterattacks from the alien forces, who were desperate to reclaim their strategic position. But with their command structure disrupted, the aliens' efforts were disorganized, giving the human forces a critical advantage. As the battle stabilized, Mark Taylor was called back to the flagship for an urgent briefing. In the war room, Mark joined General Abrams, Commander Sarah Knox, and a group of intelligence officers gathered around a series of holographic displays. The air was tense, charged with the gravity of their next decisions. "We've intercepted a series of encrypted transmissions between the alien forces and what appears to be their supreme command," one of the intelligence officers reported. "The loss of Varnus IV has caused some panic in their ranks." "This could be the break we need," General Abrams said, his voice steady. Do we have any leads on where this Supreme Command might be located? Sarah stepped forward, activating another display which showed a star map with several highlighted sectors. Our analysts believe the Supreme Command is located in the Zeta Reticuli system. It's heavily fortified, possibly the center of their entire military operation in this galaxy. Mark studied the map, noting the strategic layout. A direct assault would be costly. We need to consider a different approach. That's why we're here, General Abrams affirmed. We need a plan that maximizes our current advantage without risking unnecessary lives. As they delved into strategy, the war room's door opened, and an unexpected figure entered. Ambassador Lin, a seasoned diplomat known for her role in brokering peace across troubled sectors. Her presence signaled a shift in their usual military-focused discussions. General Abrams, commanders, she greeted, nodding respectfully. I believe there might be a diplomatic angle we can exploit. Mark was skeptical but kept an open mind. In war, unconventional methods could sometimes yield the best results. Ambassador Lin, please elaborate, Sarah invited. Lin approached the display, pointing to a smaller, less fortified planet in the Zeta Reticuli system. This is Halcyon, a colony under alien control but populated by a mix of species, including some who are sympathetic to our cause. My sources indicate there is significant unrest there, and with the right support, we could incite a rebellion. This would force the Supreme Command to divert forces to Halcyon, weakening their defenses. The rebellion on Halcyon was in full swing. Mark Taylor and his team, alongside Ambassador Lin and the coalition of local insurgents, had managed to seize control of several key installations, causing significant disruption in the alien command structure on the planet. Despite their initial successes, however, the real challenge lay ahead, sustaining the uprising and dealing a critical blow to the alien forces. Under the pale light of Halcyon's twin moons, Mark and Commander Sarah Knox reviewed their strategy within the makeshift command center they had established in a captured facility. Maps and digital displays illuminated their intense faces as they planned their next moves. We've got their attention, that's for sure, Sarah remarked, pointing to the latest intel reports on troop movements. Reinforcements from the Supreme Command are being diverted here. Mark nodded, his eyes scanning the data. We need to keep up the pressure. The more forces they divert here, the less they have to defend their main base in the Zeta Reticuli system. Ambassador Lin joined the discussion, her expression serious but hopeful. The local population is rallying. The oppression they've endured has made them eager for change. We need to ensure we support them effectively. Agreed, Mark said. Let's make sure our supply lines to the insurgents are secure. I don't want them running low on essentials at a critical time. As they solidified their plans, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, distant explosions signaling another skirmish on the outskirts of their controlled zone. The conflict was drawing in more alien troops, but the insurgents, fueled by the desire for freedom, fought with unwavering determination. Over the next several days, Mark and his team engaged in numerous operations, from sabotage missions to direct assaults, each designed to further weaken the alien grip on Halcyon. With every victory, the spirit of the resistance grew, but so did the ferocity of the alien counterattacks. During a particularly intense battle to reclaim a communication hub, Mark found himself at the forefront, leading a squad through the war-torn streets of Halcyon's capital. The air was thick with the acrid smoke of burning structures, the sounds of battle echoing through the city. "Keep moving! Cover to cover!" Mark shouted to his team as they advanced, dodging energy blasts and returning fire. They reached the hub, a towering structure heavily guarded by alien forces. With precision and coordination, Mark's squad breached the building. A fierce firefight ensued within the confined space, the outcome hanging in the balance until the last alien defender was taken down. Securing the communication hub allowed the insurgents to disrupt the alien command network on Halcyon, significantly hampering their ability to coordinate their forces effectively. As they consolidated control over the hub, Mark received a communique from General Abrams. "Commander Taylor, your efforts on Halcyon are paying off. We've noticed significant movement of alien forces away from their Supreme Command. It's time to prepare for the final phase." Mark acknowledged the message, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. "Copy that, General. We'll continue to hold Halcyon and keep them focused here." With the success on Halcyon drawing more enemy resources away from their main base, the Coalition began to amass a considerable force for a decisive strike on the Zeta Reticuli system. Mark knew that the upcoming battle would be the culmination of all their efforts, a chance to end the threat once and for all. As he looked out over the city, now quiet under the cover of night, Mark felt the weight of the coming days. The success of the uprising on Halcyon was crucial, not just for the tactical advantage it provided, but also for the hope it inspired across occupied worlds. The fight was far from over, but they were closer than ever to turning the tide of the war. The strategic successes on Halcyon had indeed shifted the balance of power. As Mark Taylor and his team prepared for the final assault on the alien Supreme Command in the Zeta Reticuli system, the atmosphere among the Coalition forces was one of cautious optimism mixed with the grim understanding of the battle's stakes. In the flagship's war room, General Abrams, Mark, and Sarah Knox, along with other key military leaders, finalized their assault plans. The holographic map in the center of the room displayed the Zeta Reticuli system, with the heavily fortified alien command base highlighted. "This is it," General Abrams declared, his voice resonant with authority and determination. "The intelligence from Halcyon has confirmed that a significant portion of their fleet has been diverted to quell the uprising. We will likely not get a better opportunity than this." Mark nodded, his focus sharp. "Our plan is to strike fast and hard. We'll use the element of surprise to our advantage. Sarah, your squadron will lead the initial strike, targeting their outer defenses. Once a breach is secured, my team will infiltrate the command center." Sarah, reviewing the tactical display, added, "We've equipped the fighters with the latest anti-shield missiles from R&D. They should give us the edge we need to penetrate their defenses." As the fleet made its final preparations, Mark geared up, checking each piece of his equipment meticulously. He then gathered his team for a brief pep talk. "Many of you have been with me since the beginning of this conflict," he started, his gaze meeting each of his team members. "We've faced losses, and we've celebrated victories. Today we carry the hopes of the entire Coalition. Stay sharp, cover each other, and let's end this war." Cheers of determination filled the room, the team's morale boosted by Mark's words. They were ready for whatever awaited them. The assault began with the Coalition fleet emerging from hyperspace near Zeta Reticuli. As anticipated, the initial surprise of their arrival gave them a crucial advantage. Sarah's squadron swooped in, missiles blazing as they pummeled the alien base's outer defenses. Explosions lit up the space around the base as their shields faltered and then failed. "Defense breach confirmed," Sarah reported over the comm. "Path is clear for the infiltration team." Mark, leading his team in a heavily armored dropship, dove towards the breach. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around them, but the path cleared by Sarah's squadron allowed them to land relatively close to the command center. The ground battle was fierce. Mark's team moved quickly, using the chaos around them to their advantage. They fought their way through the base, encountering stiff resistance from the alien forces determined to protect their command hub. Reaching the command center, Mark used an explosive charge to blow the doors. They stormed inside, engaging in intense close-quarters combat. Mark led from the front, his plasma rifle cutting down enemy combatants as he and his team secured the room. Once the command center was under control, they quickly worked to seize critical systems. Mark accessed the main console, beginning the process of shutting down the alien base's operations. As the base's systems went dark, the remainder of the alien forces began to surrender, their command structure too crippled to continue the fight. General Abrams, monitoring the situation from the flagship, allowed himself a small smile as he received the report of their success. "Command center secured," he announced to the Coalition leaders. "The enemy is standing down. We've won." Cheers erupted across the fleet. The long and grueling conflict was over, thanks to the strategic brilliance and bravery of Mark and his team. Back on the flagship, as the celebrations began, Mark and Sarah shared a quiet moment looking out at the stars. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of their losses and victories. "We did. but let's make sure this peace lasts. As peace negotiations began and the galaxy started to heal from the scars of war, Mark knew their fight was not just for victory, but for a future where such conflicts would no longer be necessary.